Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the live stream, the last live stream of January. We are so happy to see all of you and that we got a little sunshine today. Happy Friday, happy payday. We just have some announcements today before we get to the meat of our live stream. As we said last week, the Good Teaching Conference is coming on February 26th. It will be a virtual conference just like the Assof Technology Conference. It will follow the same format, etc. And it will be done via Google Meet, just like it was before. And we have 30 people or 30 sessions signed up. It's probably actually closer to about 20 people, all doing multiple sessions. And we want to invite anyone who has any idea. You know, sometimes people ask like, well, what's already being done? I could fill a gap. But anything that you can present on that you think is a great idea or something that's worked for you is usually, anything you're passionate about is usually something that other teachers will be able to glean something from. It can provide value. You know, oftentimes as teachers, we think, oh, well, everybody must know this. No, everybody doesn't know this. As it turns out, you're probably a pretty unique and awesome teacher, and you probably have things to share with your fellow Assof educators. The deadline is next Wednesday, or not next Wednesday, Wednesday after next, February 10th, and it's bit.ly/Assof bunch. The A and the B are capitalized. Also, we're going to do Kid Booms again, as we typically do at the Assof Good Teaching Conference. This is a short student presentation with some pre-formatted slides, so it's easy, almost like sentence stems, but then they can add visuals, and it gives the kids a chance to talk and such. They can do their slides, record it ahead of time, and then it will be shown in that morning. If you have kids that you would like to select for this, the submission form is bit.ly/kidbooms, capital K, capital B. It'd be great to have some student voice in our day of professional learning. They're always a big hit. You have gotten several emails from me about feedback on the live stream. Thank you to about the 125 of you who have submitted that feedback. Please check your email if you haven't done it already. Please go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and close that form sometime today. As we say every time, if you need any help, please email edtech@assof.org. Office hours are Wednesdays and Thursdays, 1 to 3 p.m. The bit.ly is there on the screen. It's also in the EdTech Weekly newsletter. Next week, we will be working, I'm assuming, George, you can correct me, I'm assuming we will be working with our math TOSA, Kim Jorgensen, but next week we will have a Eureka Math lesson demo. So we hope that you will join us for next week. But now we have Teacher Clarity with Miss Ana Cordero. So as soon as she is ready, Miss Cordero can take it away.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start presenting my screen. Welcome to a series of Teacher Clarity. This is the first one in a series of Teacher Clarity. And today we are going to focus on two of the modules. Teacher Clarity, the Teacher Clarity Playbook has 9 modules, and I would like to a series of presentations with those 9 modules. So today we will focus on 2. Through this presentation, I'm going to stop 3 times, so you have time to reflect a little bit about the learning that we are having, and also to post questions or post comments. Whatever comments are always welcome. If you were to have some more information that you need, just remember that today at 3:05, from 3:05 to 4:05, I will have a follow-up session. And in this follow-up session is more like a guided practice, collaborative practice, where we can just dig a little bit deeper into the knowledge that we are presenting today. So join me later. And if you sign up in OMS, I already have your emails, and I will you right away after this presentation finished the link. If not, please go ahead and sign up after this presentation finishes if you want to join me at 3:05. Said that, let's start with our presentation. I would like to start with posting you a question. Think about the last time, was posting several questions. Think about the last time you learned something. What was what helped you to learn? Was the actions of the person that was helping you to learn? Maybe it was a teacher, or was that you learned whatever were you learning with other people? Or was that you were exposed to several experiences where you could practice that learning? Was the flow of those experiences, the sequence of those experiences, what made you learn more? So it was some of those or all of those together. So today we are going to reflect on the practices that we implement in the classroom, but under the lenses of the impact that those practices have in our students' learning. And all this is based in educational research. So let's start with this. With learning is organized and intentional, and when the learner knows what he or she is learning, great things can happen. And this is taken from the Teacher Clarity Playbook from Doc Fisher and Nancy Frey. So in order to have clarity, I would like to have some clarity in this presentation too. So I'm going to start with one part in Teacher's Clarity. This is not only the only part, as we will see through the presentation. There are more parts to Teacher Clarity, that learning intentions and success criteria. But what are we learning today? And how do we know that we have learned? So I'm learning about the impact of the Teacher Clarity to improve students' learning outcomes. And that is in the first part of the presentation, which is Module 1. And how do I know that I learned it? I can provide an overview of the visible learning. And then if you can say that statement, I can provide an overview of the visible learning research. It relates to Teacher Clarity. If you can explain the elements of a Teacher Clarity, of the Teacher Clarity, and identify skills and concepts when we are analyzing the standards, the grade level standards, then you have been successful. You learn the content. So every student deserves a great teacher, not by chance, but by design. I mean, all of us have heard that at some time. We are familiar with this statement of Frey and Fisher. But the question is, how do we become great teachers? We do become great teachers by reflecting in the impact of our instruction. And all that is about Teacher's Clarity. So also, we are very aware of the research that John Hattie have done about the instructional practices that are related to the learning of our students. And all those instructional practices are going to, most of them, all of them has some impact, some kind of an impact. Some of them will have impact that is low. Some of them will have impact that is medium. And some of them will have impact that is high impact in the student learning. And when we talk about it's not our instruction, we all know that we instruct the best we can and we prepare our lessons very well, but it's not what we instruct on, is what the students are learning. So when we talk about impact, it's always looking under students learning what we are teaching. And also we have some instructional practices, or not some practices that are negative in the learning of our students. So let's talk about those ones. If we go to the point 4, that means that the student have learned 1 year growth in our time. When we teach, we can have median impact, we can have low impact, sometimes we can have even negative impact. But what we are looking for is high impact in our instruction. So what practices can be negative impact? And this is a little bit of a review, just to understand that everything that we do, everything that happens with our students have an impact in their learning. So mobility has a negative impact, 0.34. So obviously we know that that is not going to be great for the students. Retention has a negative impact, 0.13. So which ones have low impact? And the fact that they have low impact, that doesn't mean that something happen in the classroom. It's okay, they can happen in the classroom. It's just that we try to maximize those practices that have high impact. So ability grouping has low impact. And when we talk about ability grouping, we talk about tracking, not a small group instruction. That is totally different. Ability grouping is when we decide that, okay, well, all these students that are below grade level are going to be in one class. And those students that are above grade level, they are going to be in another group because I can work a lot with them and I can make them grow a lot. Well, that is ability grouping. That has a low impact in students' learning. Then we have some practices that has medium impact in the students' learning. For example, classroom management. Obviously, we need classroom management because without management, very little learning can happen. But classroom management, it has just medium impact, 0.35. And these are the ones we are looking for. And I just wanted to do this review because in these ones, this instructional practice that high impact in the students' learning is teacher clarity. So everything that goes, as we said, past the 0.4 is accelerating learning. And we know that our students need more than growth in order to reach or to keep up with the standards, especially now that we are in this virtual way of learning that is not the greatest, but we are doing the best we can, and so we are seeing gains too, because it's not that we are losing the year. We aren't losing the year. It's just that we have to select those practices that we had worked before in the classroom, and we know because of that, even though it's a little bit a different instructional setting and maybe a little, maybe more challenging, those instructional practices are still going to work in remote instruction or virtual instruction. So that is what we need to maximize. Things like small group learning, that can be done in any setting, virtually or in brick and mortar, and it has more than 1 year growth, such as study skills. We can still teach that in a virtual setting, and that has nearly 1.5 years of growth. Repeated readings, teaching them how to access complex text to analyze through analyzing the text with repeated readings, has nearly 2 years of growth in 1 year time. Classroom discussions, there you go, 2 years growth. And we can still do classroom discussions in a virtual setting. Luckily, now we have breakout rooms, or we can do some pair and share. We can, even with the young ones, we can start trying a little bit of classroom discussions to maximize their learning and accelerate that learning that they need. Collective teachers' efficacy. This is the ding, 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 the one that really is going to give us more growth of all of those. And that is nearly 3 years growth in 1 year time. And it's when we support each other, when we work with each other, when we trust each other. Trust that everybody knows what is best for the students and everybody is doing a great job trying to accelerate and choosing those strategies or instructional practices that are going to give us more impact in the learning. And lastly, teacher clarity. That is what we are going to talk about today. So Teacher Clarity has nearly 2 years growth. So what is Teacher Clarity? There are many different definitions about what is Teacher Clarity. They are behaviors that we do when we are in the classroom with our students. They are how we present the knowledge so our students can understand it. They are making the content clear, accessible to students, and is communicating constantly with our students, communicating what are we teaching and how are we learning it and what is expected for them to learn. So there are many different authors that have talked about Teacher Clarity. So let's say one thing. Teacher Clarity is more intentions and success criteria, because by now most of us know that, okay, that is going to really give a little bit of light in the learning of our students, just telling them, okay, this is what you are learning and how do you know you're learning. That is going to help them to focus as they are learning. But it's more than that. That is only one aspect. Teacher clarity refers to clarity of organization. So our lessons, how everything that we do in our lessons are connected with the objectives. Clarity on mission. How are we doing that content, that knowledge, understandable to our students? What steps we take, what we do first, what we do next. Clarity of examples of guided practice. So as we present the content, are we giving some examples as we model? Are we letting them to practice enough time by themselves and in their groups so we can give them that gradual release, the responsibility that they need in order to be owners of their own learning, and they don't need to have us all the time there. And the last one, clarity of assessment and student learning. So as we teach, as we prepare those learning progressions, we need to prepare also the assessment, and we need also to think about that formative assessment, that constant feedback that we are receiving from the students that is letting know, are they learning? Do I have to modify? Do I have to change here? Do I have to dedicate more time in this aspect of the lesson? And at the same time, just paying extra attention to the oral feedback that they are giving us and the feedback. That is formative assessment that will allow us to know if they are growing. So the 3 questions that everybody is practically know, those questions are very important, but not because we are telling them the questions. They are important because the students should be asking their questions themselves. So we are guiding them in those questions. What are we learning? Those are the learning intentions. We will talk about the learning intentions in the next presentation about teacher clarity. The why, that is relevance, is why is this useful for me, to my life right now, to my life in the future. We will talk about that in a couple of sessions. And success criteria, that is the how do I know I learned it? And that will be in the next presentation, not in this one. So in order to have clarity, the teacher needs to know what the students need to learn, and those are the standards. The teacher needs to be very knowledgeable about the standards, and we are. But sometimes we don't have so much time to really focus on the parts of the standards, and we don't teach them in the depth we should. So knowing very well the standards and breaking the standards in the concepts and the skills is very important to have teacher clarity. And then we have to communicate what are we learning and how do you know you're learning. So the success, the criteria for success. So why do we post this? So right now probably you said, well, I can post things in because we are doing virtual, but I'm going to show you one way that we can review the learning intentions of the success criteria. During our brick and mortar classes, during our time of being in the class, we always post this for the students to refer constantly to it, and we go and check it out. So the learning intentions and the success criteria is for all the subject matters. And now in a virtual setting, maybe we would like to do something like that. This is very motivating and engaging for the students. If we just create some slides and the students need to read it, because they are the ones that they need to reflect on what they are learning and why. So what are we learning and why are we learning that? And how do I know I learn it? So far this has been a review of why it's so important to have teacher clarity. So let's take 1 minute to pause, 1 minute to reflect in what we have talked, and check these questions. What information close a loop for you? What information allows you to find a new angle? What information caused you to change direction? Just pause a minute, reflect, and if you have any comment or any question, now will be the time to do comments or questions.
And Anna, just let me know, we do have one question when you're ready.
I'm ready.
It's actually a pretty simple question. One of the teachers, Carol Gonzalez at Fremont, thank you, Carol, asked if the session in the afternoon after school will be recorded because she unfortunately cannot attend.
Yes, any sessions that I do, we will record. Yep. Just send me an email if you cannot attend, so I can, or we can post the recording probably in the website too.
Thank you, Anna. Let me check and see here. That is the only thing that has come in right now.
Perfect. Now we move along. So now we are going to start about the thing. So we said that in order to have clarity, in order to teacher clarity, the teacher needs to be knowledgeable of the standards. So being knowledgeable of the standards is knowing how we break them in concepts that we need to teach and skills that we need to teach. So I love this picture because it says all. Okay, so first we need to know our outcomes. That is what the standard is to master. And here are the standards. So the standards are broken into nouns that are the concepts we need to teach and verbs that are the skills we need to teach regarding to that standard. And those standards are going to tell us what the student needs to know and be able to do. Mm-hmm. So there are different kinds of knowledge. There is knowledge that are facts. There is knowledge that to know in order to apply it, and they need to know also when to apply that knowledge. So we will talk a little bit about that. And also we always have to think that when we are approaching standards and we know our students, we need to think about what prior knowledge the student needs to master that standard. So let's hear from Doug Fisher regarding the standards.
Welcome to Module 1. In this first module, we look at a standard or a set of standards, and we take them apart to figure out what are the skills and concepts students need to master. This is a first step planning process for teacher clarity, is knowing what students need to learn. We take apart a standard or a set of standards and we think through all of the concepts and all of the skills so that we can eventually design the learning progressions and learning intentions and success criteria. Without a good understanding of the grade level content expectations, it's very difficult to plan a lesson. We mostly then rely on just random strategies that we might have. Lessons should be based on the expectations that we are paid to teach. We have expectations in our professions of what students should master. Understanding of those standards requires analysis. We don't just read the standard and totally get it. We have to think through the skills and concepts students have to master at level in our content area. There are all kinds of knowledge that students might need to be successful. It could be declarative, just knowing what is. It might be more procedural, like how to use that information in different situations. And it might be more conditional, like how will I deploy the knowledge in a experiences. Now, the teachers have to think through the standard to say, does the standard really demand more procedural knowledge, or more additional knowledge, or more declarative knowledge? There's no one right, better way to do this. It's what the standard is asking for. What is the level of learning that students need to demonstrate mastery of that standard? When teachers look at a standard or a set of standards taken together that they're going to teach in a given unit, they look for the verbs and the nouns. That's how we like to start this process. What are the skills that students need to develop, and what are the concepts students need to develop? That process allows the teacher to think about how many lessons will it take for students to demonstrate mastery of this standard, these skills and these concepts. And then we design specific learning expectations, intentions for students around each of those concepts and skills.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fisher. He explained it really good. So now let's review what he said. So what we have to do when we are looking at and analyzing the standards, we have to look for the nouns. And the nouns represent the concepts. So we have different kinds of knowledge in that set. We have the declarative knowledge, that is what? That is really the factual information in there. For example, if I wanted to talk about biking or learning how to ride a bike, well, learning how to or riding a bike is not a declarative knowledge. Declarative knowledge will be knowing about who is the best cyclist in the world, or what happened in the Tour of France. That is the factual knowledge. Is declarative knowledge. Now we have procedural knowledge. So, okay, in this context of knowing how to ride a bike and knowing about bikes, the skills that we need to ride a bike, the knowing how to ride a bike, that is procedural knowledge. And conditional knowledge, it will be when I'm going to apply that knowledge. So obviously, if I don't have a bike, I'm not going to apply that knowledge. If I'm driving a car, I'm not going to apply the knowledge of riding a bike. So 3 kinds of knowledge are always in the concept: the facts, the knowing how, what is the procedures, and knowing when and why. So let's check in this standard. And in this standard, that is a math standard for 6th grade, the concepts are the nouns. So in order for the students to reach that standard, they need to know what is a unit rate, what are unit rate problems. They need to know what is unit pricing, and they need to know what is constant speed. Without that, that is the facts that the content that the students need to know. Without that, do the skills. So in this one, the same thing. In order to master, this is a long standard for language arts. So it's interpret information, but look at all the things that they need to know. The information is presented visually. They need to understand what is that. Information is presented orally. It's presented quantitatively. They need to know what are charts, graphics, diagrams, timelines, animations. They need to know what is text. And sometimes we think that the students know all these things, and they don't. So we need really to look carefully to the standard to make sure that the students have that information presented. And also, if they need prior knowledge in order to do the standard, we need to include it. In this one for math, so word problems, addition, whole numbers, sum, drawings, equations. The student may know how to do an equation, how to solve an equation, but if they don't understand the word equation, if they don't understand how to read, or they have trouble reading, then because they don't know the meaning of these words, or they don't have some background knowledge in these concepts, then they cannot reach the standard. And then we go to the verbs. So the verbs are the skills. So in the first one that we saw in 6th grade math, the skill is solve. And solve is a tricky word. Solve needs many steps. I mean, you said, yeah, it's solving, but what do we mean with solve? Well, maybe with solve, the students need to understand the question first that they are being asked. What do they need to solve? They need to organize step by step what they need to do. And they have to make careful calculations. That is solving, that is part of solving. They may be needed to explain with numbers or with words. That is part of solving the problem too. So solve requires many, many skills. And in here, the same thing. What are the verbs? With all this information that the student know, all this content they know, what do they need to do? They need to know how to interpret, how to explain, how to contribute, or what means to contribute to an understanding. That phrase, maybe they don't understand what means contributes to an understanding. And the same thing in math, first grade, not only the language in there. So what do we mean when we said solve this problem, or use this, or represent this? Those are skills that they need in order to solve the problem. Okay. So students need to know many, many things when we are talking about mastering the standards. They need to know facts, vocabulary, dates, rules. They need to know theories and generalizations. They need to know basic thinking skills, social skills, and they need to have metacognitive dispositions and strategic thinking, like decision making, or metacognitive dispositions. So what steps should I do first, or how can I solve that, or did I try this before and it worked with other problems? So those are metacognitive dispositions. So let's listen to, let's see how this grade level is working to break or to analyze the standards in nouns and verbs.
Okay, let's look at Module 1 in identifying the concepts that are needed for this standard. And we had already discussed that we were going to focus on standard 5.W.1, a fifth grade standard, which was write opinion pieces on topics or text supporting a point of view with reasons and information. And one of the great ways to break down a standard would be to look at the concepts and skills. So what concepts do you think are needed, or content knowledge do you think students need to be successful with this standard?
Okay, so after looking at the standard, the concepts needed for student success that we discussed are pieces, topics or texts, point of view, and information. Do we agree?
Yes. What about the skills?
The skills the students need to be successful are to write an opinion piece, to support, and to reasoning.
So in the skills that students are going to need in order to write an opinion piece, you're saying that they need to be able to reason?
Yes, because they were going to have to support their opinion with relevant evidence and be able to support their opinion with their reason.
Do we want to focus in on one particular skill for our learning progressions?
I know we had thought about the assessment and our end destination for this standard. And so I think, do you guys agree with writing an opinion piece, or write an opinion piece would be the main one?
As our focus for the learning progression?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree to write an opinion piece.
That sounds like a good skill to focus on to accomplish that standard. In looking at the standard and identifying the concepts and skills, a great strategy I use is to look at the nouns and verbs. So the concepts, being the content knowledge that students need to be successful, those are usually represented by nouns in the standard. And I know we found some great nouns in what students needed in order to be successful. And then for the skills, I found that the verbs are helpful in identifying to help us find what they need to demonstrate in order to be successful. And so one of the key verbs that we focused on was writing, to write the opinion piece.
It was interesting to watch the elementary teachers break down standard by concepts and skills. And what I noticed was how it was that they used nouns and verbs to be able to isolate on those. One of the things I was really impressed with was how very rapidly they were able to do so because they had a system in order to be able to do so. They identified concepts by looking at the nouns that were present in the standards, and they identified skills by looking at the verbs that were present in the standards.
I think analyzing nouns and verbs in a standard helps, well, I know as a teacher, it helps us to break down the learning progression. And then I think that it helps students are able to know what they need to learn. And we're able to tell them in our learning intentions what they're going to be learning, they're going to be learning it, and then they'll be able to know the success criteria. How are they going to be successful?
That was great. That was very clear. How can we approach the analysis of the standards? So in summary, what we have seen is before we need to know the standards. Everything starts with the standard. And in order to understand the standard deeply, we need to identify the concepts and the skills in that standard. So right now, I'm going to let you reflect a little bit in what you have listened and what we have been talking together. Well, it was more like one direction talking. We will talk about this in the afternoon, when we meet at 3 or 5. If you are if you are available to come. So just look at this, because this is a summary of what we have taught, what we have talked about. And then reflect. You have questions or comments. Now will be the time to post your questions or your comments.
Anna, just so that you know, I just reviewed. There's no questions that have come in. I'm going to attribute that to you, the clarity of your presentation, pun intended there. So good job.
Yeah. I would like to think that is due to the teacher clarity.
We do. We have a good number of people watching, so I think it's just good stuff. Thank you.
Good. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of pausing time so you read this carefully. Okay, so we are going to move along, and we are, since we don't have any questions, we are going to talk about, well, we talk the concepts and we talk about the skills. And now, how are we going to organize those concepts and skills in a logical way that is going to make our students understand and learn? So let's start with the second part of this presentation. So our learning intention and success criteria for the second part is I am learning how to sequence skills and concepts for students' understanding. And how do I know that? What is my success criteria? I know that I have learned it when I can identify one appropriate sequence of learning and defend the order in which content is presented. And when we talk about defend the order, it's not that we as teachers need to defend it for administrators, or we need to defend the order to our colleagues. We need to defend it for ourselves. So I look at my students, I know where my students are. So I know that maybe what works, the learning progression of content and skills and concepts is not going to be the same in my classroom that my colleague, because my colleague has different students that have similar but not exactly the same needs. So I need to defend it for me and for my students. So if I decide, for me, I'm going to have 4 learning questions because my student need a little bit more explanation in this concept or a little bit more practice in this skill, that is fine. Or if I decide, these are the learning progressions that I need to do with my students, but I know that 25% of them they don't have the prior knowledge that they need in order to master this. So probably I'm going to put one more learning progression before of everything in order to label that field, to give everybody the same good starting point. And that is what we mean with defend the order. So the same in the picture, it says everything. It says, okay, what is our desired outcome? Mastery of standards. That is our desired outcome. So what I'm going to do in order to that? Well, I'm going to backwards plan. I'm going to start with the standards, and then I'm going to see what learning progressions that are these poles in this tent my students need. They need this first, and this second, and this third, and this fourth. And for each of these poles, I will have different lessons in order for them to reach it. And each lesson will have their own learning intention. So these are learning progressions. The learning progressions is the path. Is the path that we take in order for our students to master the standards. So let's hear Nancy to talk about that.
Welcome to Module 2. In this module, we're going to take a closer look at sequencing those learning progressions. This is a place where people sometimes have some confusions about what a learning progression is and what its purpose is. So think of it this way. Learning progressions are when we go deeper into looking at the skills and the concepts that you developed in the previous module, and look closely at those to see how it is that you might align those in sequence across a unit of instruction. In addition, the learning progressions are ways of being able to look at any prior knowledge that you think your students might need. I'll give you an example. If the standard calls for an investigation to be conducted in science, then prior knowledge would have to be that they know how to use a microscope or any other scientific equipment that they might be using. That isn't called out specifically in the standard, but it's something to consider in terms of how it is that you're going to teach that module. Do my students have this prior knowledge? If they do, great. This is a time in terms of identifying those learning progressions where you're looking at the prior knowledge that they need, and you're looking at aligning the skills and the concepts that they'll be learning over the course of your unit of instruction. Standards can't be learned in a single day. That's why they're standards. But we have to figure out ways in order to be able to break them down, to decompose them a bit more. And that's where learning progressions come into play. Learning progressions are those big ideas, those tent poles that really kind of create the boundaries for what your unit of instruction is going to be. They're directly from the standards, but they are more detailed than the standard itself says in terms of its language. The learning progressions give us an opportunity to be able to figure out what our assessments are going to be at the end of that unit of instruction. The ways in which we ensure that students are moving systematically toward mastery of that standard. That means that we have to look at aligning in a sequenced kind of way the skills and the concepts. Welcome to Module 2. In this module,
so let me move it a little bit towards the middle.
Instruction is going to be. They're derived directly from the standards, but they are more detailed than the standard itself says in terms of its language. The learning progressions give us an opportunity to be able to figure out what our assessments are going to be at the end of that unit of instruction. The ways in which we ensure that students are moving systematically toward mastery of that standard. That means that we have to look at aligning in a sequenced kind of way the skills and the concepts that are contained in those standards. That you did that in the previous unit. And it's also looking at the kinds of prior knowledge that students might need in order to be able to advance toward mastery of that standard.
Okay. Very good. As I said before, I love listening to Nancy Frey and Doug Fisher. They are very clear and so knowledgeable. So if we summarize what we saw in the video, learning progressions, many authors have talked about learning progressions and define what learning progressions are. But all of them talk about they are pathways to progress, pathway to learning. We have to do the prerequisite knowledge and skills, and it's always a pathway to proficiency. So Nancy Frey talked about these poles that are the main area to have the 10 together. So being the core concepts of our standard. So after each pole, that can be a concept or it can be at a skill, we have to have formative assessment. So the poles are helping us to also define the formative assessment that the students need in order to have mastery of the concept or skill, mastery of the standards. And this is an image that I really like because it reflects the pathway that we have towards mastery. And in all this pathway, we need to listen to the students. That is our formative assessment in order to adapt or to reorganize those lessons for the mastery. They are the light in our instruction. And they said that we start with the standards. Standards is this backwards. We start with the ending product, and then we deliver it. So Pogham talks about that they are the must-learn building blocks in order to students to master the standard incrementally. And he also talks about how those building blocks are helping us to put the assessments needed in order to have a formative and assessment for the lessons. And the learning progressions, they are going to help us also with the learning intentions, because as Nancy said, we can learn the standards in one day, neither in 1 week. We have a learning progression of contents and skills, and for each one of those concepts or skills, we have learning intentions, daily learning intentions. Learning progressions help us to keep the expectations at grade level. In a study that the new teachers project have done, they noticed that out of 180 of classroom, 133 hours are in assignments that are not at grade level. Only 47 are at grade level. So the fact that we do those learning progressions are going to help us to keep at grade level, to keep teaching what we need to teach in that grade level. And we can incorporate, like we said, some prior knowledge if the students have some gaps. But we need to keep in the content for grade level. And we start with surface level thinking skills, and we move to concepts that are more high order thinking skills. We move them from comfort zone to learning zone. And that is what order, the logical of the learning progressions. We start with simple to more complex. So how do we do it? If we were to start, how do we do it? So the first thing, don't have too many. 5, no more than 5 learning outcomes for that unit of instruction. Break it in skills and concepts, and then what knowledge they need in order to reach those skills and concepts. That means any prior knowledge. And don't get lost in the weeds, they don't require every sub-skill to be named. So there is not a right way, and there is not a right number. The right way is what works for you and for your students, and the right number is what your students need. And don't worry about making mistakes, because even when we make mistakes, a well-considered learning progression will be better than just off the cuff planning. And when we sequence, the learning progressions is going to tell us where we need to do those assessments. So that is going to be very useful. And when we do the learning progressions, also we can turn them into some kind of self-assessment for the students. We just have to add all the red are learning progress. I understand those are the actional verbs that are going to turn them into a kind of self assessment for students. We can put numbers according to complexity or difficulty. And let me analyze very quickly one example, because we are nearly to finish. We start with the, we break into concepts and skills. We consider supporting standards, because there are many standards that aid that standard. And then we think about what do I need to teach and in what order. And we sequence that learning. And with this, the presentation finished. If you have questions or any comments.
Anna, currently there are no additional questions or comments in the chat. So yeah, looks like we finished right on time. Great job.
And even with the hiccup. So don't forget that today at 3:05 to 4:05, you want to join me. We are going to do two very interesting collaborative practices, instructional practices, that is text rendering and discussion roundtable. And with that, we are going to get a little bit deeper into the guided practice and collaborative discussion that we need in order to master this knowledge. So we will utilize a tool that can be useful for the future as much as you need. This is nothing that is required, but maybe this tool will be useful. And thank you very much for being with me. And I'm looking forward if any of you would like to join me today at 3:05. Sign up in OMS so I can send you the link. Thank you.
Anna, on that slide where you had your Google Meet link, is that the link you're going to be on at 3:05 today?
Yes, it is.
So let's give everybody one forward. No, two forward. One more.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll give everybody a chance to copy that down. meet.google.com/J. These are all lowercase and they're all letters. JHV-OWPS-DBR. And you did get just now a really positive comment from Ms. De Leon at VRB. She said, Anna, fantastic job. So we wanted to make sure to share that with you.
Thank you. So for more guided practice. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna, so much for your perseverance, first of all, and second, for your fantastic presentation. We really appreciate it. So folks, that brings us to 2 o'clock, and it brings us to the end of the live stream for the week. As we say at the end of every week, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and be good to our kids. Have a great weekend. Happy sunny day. Maybe get some sunshine, even though it's not going to break 60 degrees today before it goes down. And happy payday. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.